Kurt, we have big news in New York. Not Kevin Durant, RJ Barrett, and the New York Knicks reach a rookie extension, 4 years, worth up to $120 million. Now, this is the big thing that jumps out to me. The last draft pick to sign a multi-year contract extension with the New York Knicks was back in 1999 with Charlie Ward. And that's when the Knicks were good. So let's just start it off there. How do you feel about this? Are you excited about the move that New York just made?
By the way, I love that Leon Rose, for whatever you think of what he's doing, has done some things right. Like, I'm not giving up my draft picks. I'm not, or not easily. Like, I'm hoarding them, and then I'm doing smart things with them. Like, he's been patient, and now actually re-signing one of your good young players rather than trading him for some aging vet. Like, it steps in the right direction as an organization. I like this deal. By the way, it's 120 million is the number that got thrown out by the agent first. It's 107 million guaranteed with about 13 million in incentives if he makes all-star teams or all NBA teams and stuff like that. So that's a good incentive for, I like that for the Knicks end, because Barrett's the kind of guy who could get there, right? Like, he could be an all-star, and this is, hey, putting that financial motivation out there is a good thing. I like the deal. I really like that he tried to put an artificial deadline in the talks about Donovan Mitchell, right? Like, hey, you got to do it by Monday, or we're just gonna sign Barrett. Like, you got to, yeah, here's your artificial deadline. You gonna do this? No, all right, no, I'm serious. I'm gonna re-sign RJ Barrett because we like him. So they keep him at a number that's, and look, it looks like a lot of money because it is a lot of money, but with the salary cap going up, I don't know. Personally, I don't think it's an unreasonable number for betting on what RJ Barrett can be in a few years. He has the most important skill in the NBA. He can create his own shot. Would you like him to be a little more efficient with that shot? Yeah. Would you like him to be a little better at setting up teammates? Yeah. But he's 22 and he can create his own shot. That is the most valuable thing in the NBA right now. So, I mean, I thought it was a pretty fair deal. Did you? I mean, you're in New York. How's everyone reacting?
I'm in Queens, so it's kind of like, are you a Knicks fan or are you a Nets fan? But either way, I think most people are kind of taking a sigh of relief. But as far as New York fans with this deal, look, I know it's not necessarily the most glamorous thing, which always upsets New York fans. I've noticed that. It's like they almost treat their teams like a stock exchange. I love this guy for 2 weeks, and then there's a dip. Oh, trade him. But anyways, I think with RJ Barrett, the numbers you mentioned, 107 million guaranteed. Just to put that in perspective, yes, it's a lot of money, but they just signed Jalen Brunson, who had one really good year in Dallas playing alongside Luka Doncic, for $104 million.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you think about what this means, we always talk about, the rookie max extension. DeAndre Ayton, he didn't get his. Yeah. Well, you look at that 2019 class, the numbers that are being thrown out for rookie max deals, 5 years, 198 million, up to $230 million. So when you think about this deal that New York made, that they're keeping a player who has shown flashes of being very good, but still, in my opinion, the decision-making, the maturity is not there yet. And he's 22 years old. I mean, what do you expect? But for them to be that conservative, to get the deal done and somehow build a young core and keep their two superstars, and I put quotes there because they haven't reached that echelon yet, but they are the franchise players for New York at this moment. And that's the key point, right? Like, at this moment, Julius Randle is on the same deal essentially as RJ Barrett. It's a 4-year deal worth 117 million or so. So you're thinking, wow, how did they get 3 franchise-ish kind of guys, 2, and then plus the Jalen Brunson, who is kind of replacing Kemba Walker, in that role,
yeah,
all for $120 million or less. Like that to me is case study. Other teams in the league need to figure that out as far as building a young core, because the other team that I think is in a similar position as the New York Knicks would be something like the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is not on that deal. Josh Giddey and like Chet Holmgren, I think they're playing a different game. So I think this is a really cool thing for New York. They're actually making conservative, wise moves in what I call boring revolution, but it works in this city at this moment.
I think it works. I think, look, the Knicks are going to be now you're betting on, if you're a Knicks fan, like, you need a bounce back year from Julius Randle. Like, if they shop around, they can't trade him for value. He has got to bounce back this year for them to really take a step. But RJ Barrett takes a step forward. Brunson gives you a secondary shot creator. You've still got Mitchell Robinson. You've still got some other players, some young players you can play around with. We'll see what this ends up looking like, but it's a pretty good team that's set itself up. Look, the advantage to being New York is it's the advantage Miami has. It's the advantage the Los Angeles teams have. You can still go get a superstar. Like, superstars will want to come to you, I think. And I think that you just have to create a foundation they want to play with. This Knicks team might be a true number one away, but now you kind of got a situation where that guy could come in and thrive. So I'm bully. I'm strong on bully. Suddenly I sound like Teddy Roosevelt. Bully for them. I don't know where that came from. But I'm bullish on what they're doing. I do think that, like, they are headed in the right direction.
Yeah, the tree in New York was rot at the core, and I feel like this is one of those things where they're trying to build up, and like I said, very conservative. It's almost like angel investing, and this is angel investing in the NBA. Once again, we're talking at a difference of $100 million.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a lot of money in any arena, but especially in the NBA, to get your core that you believe in for a total of $300 million when people are signing rookie max extensions for $230 million.
Yeah.
One player. To me, that is the definition of angel investing. We'll see where it goes. Can Jalen Brunson continue the momentum? Can he continue to break out and do what he did in Dallas consistently? We'll see. Maybe he can become like a Jaylen Brown. If that is the case, then wonderful. Maybe RJ Barrett can become a franchise player like Jason Tatum. Maybe, who knows? He's so young. He's 22. And maybe Julius Randle will continue to improve. We saw him steadily get better, and he was making strides in his career. As you mentioned, last year was a dip. So how will he respond? But for that bet, 3 players, $300 million, to me, that is like, that's the angel investing sauce that is so cool that we're seeing. We just don't see that in New York because, historically, the past 20 years, since Charlie Ward in 1999, the New York Knicks have been playing that game of let's go get that superstar who can save us. And to me, that quest for immortality is a lot like Excalibur with King Arthur, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's this idea, Kurt, where it's like, if I could be the one to pull Excalibur out, so then how many have tried? How many have failed? It's like, leave that alone. Like, please, you don't need to try that again. It's too expensive an experiment. And the myth is a myth for a reason.
Yeah. I also think that what's been great about New York is they've gotten away from the bad habits, some of the bad habits, and like not re-signing anybody, number one draft pick or first round draft pick since Ward. But there's always been this sense of you can't rebuild in New York. You've got to do it now. You've got to do it fast. We have to be big. We have to be stars. Jeannie Buss kind of talked about that with the Lakers this week, and it made me concerned in the long term because when you start doing that, when you start thinking short term, you eventually kind of cut yourself off. And the thing is, Knicks fans are smart. Like, if you're, I don't want to say tearing it down and doing the process rebuild, but if you take a step back and say, hey, this is where we're at, this is what we need to do, and you're just upfront with, we're going to make smart draft picks, we're going to develop these guys, we're going to keep them and build a core, the fans will buy into the hope, right? Like, I think the fans are smart enough to know you don't have to just, hey man, we better go get another star. We better bring in star X at the cost of whatever. It just doesn't, it's not how you can build something sustainable.
Yeah, and I think the point here is that as far as managing expectations, to me, this team could be on a very good year, 6th to 8th in the conference.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like we're talking about like sneaking into the playoffs here and playing a nice first round, and then let's get some playoff games back in Madison Square Garden and move forward. But I think that type of year 1 to year 5, year 1 to year 3 to year 5, like that kind of trajectory is the trajectory that New York needs. It's kind of like you go to the doctor, like, it's like, okay, we need to slow down. Like you said, we need to slow down. Let's take a step backwards, assess the situation, and then recover. Because once that they get that core, I think the next thing would be, okay, well, let's think about the supporting cast. Do we believe in this, this trio that we've assembled? If so, the rest of New York has always concerned me. Guys 4 through the rest of the bench. Like, to me, that's always kind of been a little concerning. The recent draft picks as well, being able to realize that, hey, Kevin Knox didn't work out. Like, let's move on. Kemba Walker, we got him. Didn't work out. Let's move on. That ability to cut bait in New York, I think, is also a very promising sign, right? But once they establish the core, then they establish the bench. And then I think you're in a position like you're describing where this becomes a very tantalizing, proposition to a player, whoever your franchise pick is to be a number one superstar. If you can't grow and develop within the organization, that is a compelling offer at that moment. Right now, it's a disaster. Why would you want to go to New York?
Yeah, I think that reputation is changing among players too, which is a good sign.
Now we have to talk about Donovan Mitchell briefly.
Yeah.
Because that rumor, it really kind of gained a lot of steam, and now it almost happened. Do you still think it could happen?
I do, actually. I think, look, this felt the RJ Barrett signing, like I said, was an artificial deadline the Knicks set up, and Leon Rose set up like, hey, and by the way, smart play if you're happy keeping Barrett, because the only way things get done, frankly, in life half the time, but certainly in NBA, is there's got to be a deadline. If you let guys kind of think about it and I'll get around to it, like they'll think about it and get around to it for like, it'll stay in that kind of wishy-washy area forever. So the artificial deadline, especially if you're willing to keep him, is a good sign. Now that Barrett's re-signed, everybody took a step back and paused. But at the end of the day, I don't think it really changes the dynamic. What I have been told, and I'm not alone like on this, I know Mark Berman from the New York Post has been front and center on this part, but what I heard from people was, yeah, they'd like Barrett, but what they care about are unprotected first-round picks. At the end of the day, that's what matters most to the Utah Jazz. And nobody can really offer more of those than the Knicks. The Knicks just have the best pick package. And so it's just a question of what that ends up looking like. And if RJ Barrett's not in it, is someone else. And this is, by the way, like, whether Quentin Grimes is in the deal or not. And Utah reportedly wants the Lakers in the deal because they have two, 27 and 29. We're talking like 7 years out, but they have first round picks they can throw in this deal theoretically to get, if they're willing to get rid of Russell Westbrook and bring back Bogdanovich and I don't know, maybe Cam Reddish or whatever that combo ends up looking like. The idea is the Jazz want picks and they're going to look for ways to get that. And I don't think that changes. It doesn't, like, the thing is, Corey, who's the other team in the mix? Miami? Miami's offer is Miami's offer. Like they can throw in one or two picks, Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson to match salaries. You can tweak around the edges, but the offer is the offer. The Knicks can just beat that if they want to.
The thing about this Donovan Mitchell trade to me, it just comes down to this idea, well, what do you think he's worth?
Yeah. And
to me, that is a very opaque question, because if you would have asked me that question 2 years ago, I would have said he's worth an awful lot, because you're basically operating off this idea of potential. Coming out of the bubble, Kurt, I mean, the stars that we saw, Jamal Murray, Donovan Mitchell, right? Like that rivalry, I was excited for. And I thought, remember that? I thought that was going to be electric. I thought this was going to be the thing for the next few years. I thought that was going to be a premonition. I haven't seen Jamal Murray play since, and then Donovan Mitchell has taken a huge step back, in my personal opinion, because he had at one point the best team in the league. The Quinn Snyder's team was like the best team in the league from top to bottom, and they weren't able to do anything substantial with it. So I personally think that his value is not in a good place right now, especially with Rudy Gobert resetting the value within the whole market, which I think they severely overpaid for Rudy Gobert. The Minnesota Timberwolves did. So when you think about this market that's basically priced out, like as far as just everything's overvalued, and then you have Donovan Mitchell, who underperformed on his way to what was becoming one of the heir apparents of the whole league. I don't know if he's worth that deal in Miami, or if you're the Knicks, like, are you really worth? Like, what is he worth to you? And that becomes very tenuous, particularly in this rebuild situation where Utah is like, we want to move on. We're looking for picks. This, I think, puts him in a very interesting moment. Who's going to take him?
By the way, I think your point, what is he worth to you, is really at the heart of some of this, because if you're Miami, you've got Tyler Hero. How much, not Donovan Mitchell is a better player than Tyler Hero, but one pick worth, two pick, what's that value range? How much better is he? How much are you willing to give up, and how much future are you willing to risk, like, to get that done? Is he really that much better than Tyler Hero that you're like, wow, I got to put 2 unprotected first round picks in this? I don't know that it's that big a leap. Where the Knicks, trying to establish themselves, talking about that foundation they're trying to build. I feel like it's a slightly different calculus. Plus, they've got a lot more picks. Like they can afford to give them up and not damage and still have, if they give up 2 first-round picks, they've still got unprotected and 5 total. They've still got like 4 more first-round picks they can trade to bring in other players and stuff. Like they leave themselves flexibility to do other things. So the situation's a little different. I will also say this, just from Utah, the pure negotiating point of view. If you're the Knicks, I'm willing to wait this out a little bit because Danny Ainge has a new coach in Will Hardy coming in, and the youngest coach in the NBA, trying to establish a new culture in Utah. And if he's got to sit down the first day and answer at media day and answer 30 minutes of Donovan Mitchell, how are you going to use Donovan Mitchell? Is that trade? Like if that's the conversation, because that will be the conversation every day until he's traded, it becomes a distraction that's hard to deal with. The Jazz don't want that. And the Knicks may be willing to say, hey, we can wait.
Yeah, and I think that's probably wise on there, because now what you're basically doing is, putting the onus on them and saying, look, if you want to deal with all that, like we saw all the circuses that happened around the league recently with disgruntled superstars. If you want to deal with that, go ahead. In the middle of new ownership, new head coach, new vision, good luck with that, right? And I think you're right. I think it's a very astute point. And with the whole, what is Donovan Mitchell worth to you question, I think clearly, if you're talking about a Utah Jazz rebuild, that I don't even want to go into that. The New York City kind of rebuild that we are seeing is not obviously totally different places in the rebuild kind of idea, but I think you'd have to be a little cautious there. Ultimately, what we're seeing from Donovan Mitchell is there's a critical fork in the road, right? And I like him. I think he's I admire what he puts out there. I admire the way he carries himself. But ultimately, he has 2 different routes in front of him. He can either, push through and become that franchise player, that all-star, that superstar that we saw flashes of back in the bubble, or he can become like a Victor Oladipo. And I think that right now, that is an interesting question. Like, what is Victor Oladipo worth to a team? Turns out he wasn't a franchise player like we thought he was. Turns out he wasn't even number 2. Turns out like he's, one of the 3rd, 4th options on a Miami Heat team, right? And I think that's kind of like understanding that question of, well, what is he worth to you? And that's a really hard question to ask, because in Miami, Victor Oladipo's that, but in Indiana, he was another thing, but he was not successful in Indiana. So is he really worth that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And actually, Oladipo is one of the guys I'm kind of, by the way, quietly most interested to watch this year. He had the health issues. He never quite got right. He looked better in the playoffs for them with a full off season of training, stepping into a role in Miami and not asked to be, the man per se. He gets to be Robin, to use John Wall's words. I think he could really have a bounce back year. And they're going to need it in Miami after losing PJ Tucker and now losing Markieff Morris, losing some forwards. They're going to need some guys to step up. And quietly, Victor Oladipo is an interesting guy to watch.